The Roland CR78. I've got to be honest, it might be my most favouriteest drum machine. You've seen this specific unit in a few of my videos, including midifying it a few years ago, and most recently performing with Heimbach and Rotopops. We used this to record the third EP of ours, and we also took it on the road to play it live and basically play the songs over the preset drum patterns. Ooh. Anyway, the Roland CR78 came out in 1978, and it was one of the uncomfortable transition point drum machines between organ drum machines, you know, the and the relatively more bombastic 808 and 909s of the 80s. It is one of the earliest programmable drum machines. Having a quick look on Wikipedia, it was used in quite a few prominent songs, including Tears for Fears, Mad World, In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, and also Heart of Glass by Blondie. However, the thing is, like in Heart of Glass by Blondie and also In the Air Tonight, it wasn't the main drum machine. It was always a topper drum machine. It was a bit that started, and then the bigger drums came in afterwards. That's the thing about the CR78. It's not the frumpiest of drum machines. However, I really quite like the CR78. The organ style of drum machines, you know, the click, clock, 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 they all have a very similar sound. However, I find that the snare is always a make or break with these kind of drum machines. I'm not going to mention any drum machine names because I don't want to badmouth one of your favorite drum machines now, but I have to say the CR78 snare, ooh, magnifique. It is a very similar snare design to a lot of the other organs. For instance, it's quite similar to the one that we spoke about that was a DIY magazine synthesizer. How it does it is it does one of the tom sounds, which is like a pinging bandpass filter, like a, and pops over the top of that a decaying noise. The decaying noise, which might have also been used for the hi-hat, is plopped on top to become the snare as well. In the physical world, that makes sense because the snare is basically a small tom with a spring on the bottom to make it go. Anyway, as I've been using the CR78, I've always had one slight problem with it, and that's the fact that it's not very frumpy below. And that's because it's only got a mix output. All of the levels of each of the drum machines have already been preset to go out together. Problem is the bass drum sometimes is a little bit low, the snare drum is sometimes a bit tinny, things like that. And I've always been wanting to make adjustments like the volume of the kick drum or adjusting the EQ on the kick drum or the snare or the hi-hats, but not affecting the rest of the drum machine. Up to this point, this has not been possible because they're all merged in together. At the end of this video, we're going to be recording a song that I figured out last night. I stopped myself from recording it last night because I wanted to act upon my gripe with the CR78 prior. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be opening it up and adding separate outputs so we can plug the kick drum, the snare drum, the toms, the rim shot and also the hi-hats all out separately so we can adjust them or EQ them or add effects to them separately.
We're gonna start by taking it to pieces. This is the CR78 if you've never seen it before, but you did see it at the start of the video. Let's turn it upside down and get the screws out, remove it from its wooden enclosure of doom. The top circuit board is the sequencer one, the bottom one is the business end where the drum voices are. This is the MIDI modification I added a couple of years ago, and this is the schematic for the drum voices. If we look down here, for instance, you can see this is the bass drum. That's the schematic for the bass drum. This is the rim shot, this is the cabassa, for instance, and all of that. They're all labeled out. These wires here, you can see they all connect together to a mix bus. This is how all of the drum voices are mixed together, and then it goes over to that, which is the mixer. This is the snare drum. As you can see, it's got two separate outputs. You've got the tom sound and the noise sound, so they get mixed together onto the mix bus. First, we're going to cut this from the mix bus and add a switched jack socket to it. Why a switched jack? That's because when you plug it in, it breaks the connection. So when it's not plugged in, it acts like normal. When you plug it in, it breaks and comes out of there instead. So we're going to wire a blue wire into the mix bus, so that wires to the switch of the jack socket, and then we're going to wire a yellow wire to both of those resistors that we saw on the schematic and wire those both to the jack socket as so.
Now hopefully when I plug a jack into this jack socket, we're not going to hear the snare anymore. Yes, that's good news. Now let's plug the end of this jack into the mixer and hopefully we're going to hear the snare. That's really good, the noise floor's good. In fact, I think the noise floor's better. Yeah. Right, time to find the kick drum output and do exactly the same.
So we already know the kick drum is over here, so we just need to figure out where the output of it is, and it's right there. So we're going to cut R642 off of the board, wire it the same as the jack, so the output of the resistor goes into the tip, and it works as so. And then we're going to do the same with the rim shot, but with the capacitor 595, and then we're going to wire all of the toms together to make their own mix bus, and then do exactly the same to a jack socket yet again. This preset potentiometer here adjusts the pitch of the bass drum, so I wanted to make this external, so we cut that resistor off and then wired these two connectors to a 10k resistor that's going to connect to the back of the enclosure. So happy face, we can now tune the kick drum too.
So we've got the pitch on here, but there's also, if you're interested, there's the decay for the kick drum right here. But it's not pretty. You can go from really small to, but I like finding the middle ground and just leaving it.
Now time for the cringy bit. We're going to drill some holes in the back. I know some of you are thinking, oh, keep it standard, just sample it and use the samples. Having done this for as long as I've done it, I can safely say it's not the same. Call me crazy, but something about the transients and the way it mixes together and the gain staging and whatnot, if doing it in the analog form like I'm doing, it's just, well, world's different, but call me crazy, I don't care. Anyway, we're going to plop it back in here and we're going to see what it sounds like.
So we have the CR78 now in normal operation as usual. Yeah. Now let's plug a cable into the kick output. It's disappeared. We're going to plug the kick into its own channel. And now we can EQ it. Or send the kick into some reverb. Or do the opposite and send the rest of it into reverb, except for the kick. Which is better? Let's get the snare, plug it into its own thing as well. Maybe put that into some delay. Toms have their own outputs as well. Let's plug that in. Put the toms through its own reverb again. I went through a load of the patterns and multi-track recorded all of the stems, and they're available over on Patreon for you to use whatever. You can pull out the kick drum, you can have just the snare, you can have just the reverb, whatever, just have a look, it's all over there. But whilst I was doing that, I was also recording it onto the reel-to-reel. And now we can play it all back at a slower speed to get a little bit more of a beefy tone. Multi-track versions of the slowed down reel-to-reel version is also available over on Patreon as well. Anyway. There's also multi-track stems of other things like rewinding and making backwards drum beats like this. Anyway, let's get back on track and record that song. I'm going to quickly check a video because I did record it because I knew I was going to forget what the riff was, so here it is. The bass line is on the Korg MS-20. Funnily enough, this Korg MS-20 has been broken for the last couple of years. I've had it in the corner on a, I will fix it, I'll get around to it, I will, but it never happened. So luckily, Hack Modular was happy to fix it, but I did have to confess about how I broke it.
Good evening, looking at this MS-20 and it's fixed. Hey, there's a happy boy.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
So Sam, what happened to this MS-20?
Oh, God. Well, years ago I plugged it into a Van de Graaff generator to try and make the Van de Graaff generator play it, but it jumped over the opto isolator and blew it. It's insane the amount of stuff you've got. You've got a list, haven't you? The sound is very simple. It's using both of the oscillators, but the second oscillator is tuned down to harmonize. So it sounds like Ridge Racer. Right, so I have a song arrangement drawn here. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna record in all of the drums. They're on the 4 separate channels and there's a reverb as well. We're gonna record it onto the tape. I've got the Beat Step Pro here. Actually, before I forget, so this last step, we've actually got 16 steps being triggered out. That's actually going into a channel. We've got that in channel 16. So we actually have a clock trigger going into it. We're going to use this clock trigger to sync everything up to afterwards. Yeah. 2, which is the kick drum, 3, which is the snare drum, 4, which is the rim shot, 5, which is the hi-hat, 6, 7, 8. We're going to do all of them actually, just so it records over blank. We got 14 and 15, which is the reverb, and 16, which is the clock. Let's run through the arrangement and just see where we get to. 3, 2, let's go. Down. Whew, noisy. Yeah, that sounds good. Right, let's return to Z. Let's record the bass line. As you saw just earlier, I recorded on channel 16 a trigger clock. That is like a pa 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 pa. We can use this the same as the voltages coming out of a modular synth to plug into a modular synth to tell it to do something. So we're going to plug this into a sequencer to make it go forwards on every p. So it's going to be in sync with the reel-to-reel. So let's record some sequencer stuff. So if I press play, get it coming out of the left and right. You hear that? So I'm going to get the output of that, the direct output, into the input of this sequencer over here and plug it into the forwards of this. If I press play, we should see that going forwards. Yes, you can see the clocks moving through. I'm taking it out of the mix. It's syncing up to that trigger now. So we've got a trigger coming out of the reel-to-reel. And then if we press play from that clock that is on the tape, hopefully that should trigger it. Get in tune. Okay, how many channels have I got left? Surprisingly small. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And because I'm recording all of the reverbs in as well, I've got the clock track here. I can probably over-record. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got the two end channels as well. So next one I'm going to do is noise, like whoosh, 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 whoosh. And I'll do that now. Okay, right, time to record. Right, so we're going to record number 8, which is noise. Right, time for the noise track. Just going to hold it like this. Right, really simple pad this is. I recorded it about 5 BPM quicker than I wanted it to be, so we could bring the speed down of the tape so it brings it down a little bit more to get it all a little bit more frumpy. After that, I used the rest of the reel-to-reel channels to add more melodic and percussive elements, and we shall have a listen to it all now.
It is available on BANDCAMP and also Patreon, so download all of that stuff. And all of the samples and whatnot I mentioned, they're all linked below. Anyway, have a lovely time. Don't be scared to try it. Try it later.